Good afternoon, everybody. How is Tech Summit so far for you? Good? Great, great. So welcome to the last session for the day. My name is Rowan Daly. I'm an Azure Global Black Belt specialist focusing on our hybrid management solutions. And I'm in between you and drinks. So I'm going to keep it simple and fast. So this evening we're going to be talking about protecting your data with modern backup solutions and archiving solutions and disaster recovery solutions. And our focus is really about data protection and recovery solutions inside the Azure workspace. So I know you have had a lot of slides all day, so let's start with a demo. Let me go here and let's jump over to our demo environment for a minute. Okay, so I have this blog that's running in my VMware on my ESXi host. Very, very important blog. As you can see, it has my Rick Stanley videos. Very, very important thing for my environment. So that blog is made up of 4 virtual machines, a blog engine, SQL backend, and some file services that are running in my VMware infrastructure. So, like so often happens, sometimes my environment goes offline. And let's make sure that my environment is up at the moment. So I'm going to start by pinging my web server. So my web server is up and running, but I'm going to execute a process that takes my environment offline. So this is running in some data center on premises, and eventually, because of a failure, my infrastructure is going to go offline. So if I look at my virtual machines, my IIS server, my SQL server, and my blog engine, eventually you'll notice that they are offline. And if I go back to start and keep pinging my application, you'll see that that application is now offline. So because my blog is very important to me and I need to keep watching Rick Stanley videos when I'm at work, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go into my Azure infrastructure and I am going to open my environment, and I'm going to execute a process that is going to fail my application over into Azure with a click of a single button. So in Azure, what I have is my virtual machines protected in what is called a recovery services vault. And I'm going to go into that recovery services vault, and I'm going to go to a function called a recovery plan, which is my single button to orchestrate failover of my workloads. And I'm going to right-click on that option, and I'm going to say, okay, DR, a disaster has taken place on premises. I need to fail over my blog into Azure so that it can be up and running. So I start by failing over that machine. I choose a network that I want to fail over into, and I'm executing the failover of my application. And in a moment, we're going to come back, and we're going to ensure that an application that we fail over is available inside Azure. All right. So that's the failover of our application. But let's talk generally about some of the challenges that take place when you're looking at protecting your workloads in the enterprise. Now, the way business is now is today is that everything happens at the, not to be cliche, but at the speed of light. And business who need to be very successful need to be able to have an infrastructure that is fluid and be able to address the needs that that organization might need to have. But when you look at what is happening, there are a couple of key challenges that affect most modern enterprises. If you're a CIO, if you're a DR manager, or just a general infrastructure manager, there are some key things that you're concerned with. How do I limit downtime? How do I ensure that, with all the data that is in my infrastructure, how do I reduce the cost of running that data, maintaining that data, having it available, and having a DR infrastructure that scales with my enterprise needs? The other thing is, how do I manage complexity? So more and more, with security requirements, with the ability to integrate with third-party businesses, there are so much complex infrastructure that needs to be deployed. So it might be a federation resource, it might be multi-factor authentication, it might be integration from a directory services point of view. But the idea is that the need and the infrastructures that you have in your organization becoming more complex on a day-to-day basis. And obviously, because they drive the availability of your business and they drive success in your business, keeping those infrastructure available is very important. As organizations become more connected also, ensuring compliance is also very, very important. So if you're in healthcare or in financial services, having the data that is focused on archiving and meeting compliance requirements is very, very important. So these are key challenges that all enterprise organizations face. But also, from a backup, disaster recovery point of view, organizations are very, very concerned about how do I deploy a backup or a DR solution that scales. So if you think about the traditional way that we do DR, you have an infrastructure running on-premise, and you might stand up a secondary infrastructure, some miles away. You might be in a colo facility, and you have the same infrastructure that you have on-premise redundant, in that secondary or colo facility. So it all comes down to these key challenges and managing cost across this type of environment and ensuring availability at the same time. So when we look at the traditional method of doing enterprise protection or enterprise DR availability, there are some key things that come into place. There's a whole matter of high availability, and there's on the other spectrum, you're talking about archiving and backup. So data availability and disaster recovery. How many folks in the room, have a similar question or similar concerns in their infrastructure? You might be managing an enterprise, and these are key things that you focus on probably a weekly basis. How do I make the infrastructure highly available? Anybody like that? Great. So when you talk about this scenario, and you talk about disaster recovery or high availability, one of the things that happen as you need to minimize RPO is that the cost to have this available becomes higher. So you might be running, redundant clusters. You might have an active scenario where you have a colo facility where you have an application that is replicating over a WAN infrastructure, and you have servers, clusters, storage, physical components replicating and available in that secondary data center. So our concern is, and most organization concern is that this can be costly. To have a solution in a traditional manner that allows you to have your infrastructure available can be costly. Microsoft's view is that that shouldn't be the way. Our view is that there should be an opportunity or the possibility for you to have low RPOs, business continuity, and data protection in a manner that allows you not to break the bank. So yes, there might be some initial setup costs, the more that you're looking, lower RPOs. But in a general sense, we view having software as a service as an opportunity for you to protect all the applications inside your infrastructure. So if you think about how organizations protect data or protect applications now, you might tier applications, your tier 1, your tier 2 applications. And tier 1 applications, you spend a lot of money on protecting those applications. But you might have a tier 3 application that you say, okay, I'll recover from backup with that application. Our view on how we allow or leverage Azure for disaster recovery and disaster recovery and availability is that all your applications in your environment can be protected, leveraging software as a service and also giving the ability to democratize your protection, giving you choice as to how you protect your environment. So our view is that Azure, and this is what we posit Azure on, it is the only hyperscale environment that allows you to protect end-to-end all your applications inside the Azure cloud. And when we say end-to-end, it means not only backup or archiving, but it also allows you to leverage DR capabilities in the Azure cloud. So when you have an environment that is powered from a cloud-based or a hyperscale environment to protect your environment, there are some key things that you're able to achieve. So you have the ability, it's a comprehensive end-to-end solution, as I said a while ago. And then also you have the ability to reduce costs. So now you're not investing from a CapEx point of view. You're not buying hardware, you're not buying additional storage, you're not buying routers, switches, that type of thing. You are just leveraging Azure as a storage location to protect your resources. Now, for most organizations, compliance is very, very important. And that's one of the key things that we focus on in the Azure space. So if you have HIPAA, Sarbanes-Oxley compliance and stuff like that, our infrastructure meets these compliance capabilities and ensure that when you put your data in Azure, they'll be compliant. Because organizations are becoming more and more global, we have a number of regions where these resources are rolled out into. So wherever you are, wherever your business is, whatever branch office you might have, we give you the ability not only to use resources that are located, let's say, in the continental US, but you can access resources in a data center that is close to the line of business or close to the area that your business is running in. So what are the key core components of this protection capabilities in Azure? And they stand on 3 pillars. So we have 3 things: our cloud-first backup, our cloud-first archive, and cloud-first disaster recovery. So cloud-first backup is a SaaS-based solution that allows us to back up our virtual machines, our VMware infrastructure, our SQL databases, Exchange, Windows clients to the Azure using Azure storage. SaaS service, you don't have to deploy any infrastructure on-premise. All of that management plane is in Azure for you. Cloud-first archiving. How many folks are still using tapes, by the show of hand? How many folks have had to recover data from tapes? Painful, right? So with Azure, what we give you the ability to do is if you have the need for compliance and archiving, you can leverage Azure storage to replicate or copy your data into Azure for archiving purposes. And then also, cloud-first disaster recovery. We give you the capability to leverage the Azure environment for disaster recovery of your workload. So basically, we replicate running virtual machines into Azure, shut down and available for you to recover from them. So let's take a quick look at what first cloud backup looks like. So with cloud backup, we give you the ability to have cloud as a data plane and a management plane. So what does that mean? You have the ability to store your backups in the Azure storage. Then also your management plane is in Azure. It's a single interface that allows you to connect your resources into Azure and back up those resources, whether they're running in Azure or they're running on-premises. So the backup scenarios that we support backing up cloud workloads. So if you have workloads running in Azure, we have the ability to back them up. If you have VMs running in Azure, we can back those VMs up also. If you're running, for example, SQL Azure, Azure Backup supports the backing up of SQL Azure in the cloud. But because enterprises don't only exist in the cloud, and they tend to be hybrid, we also give you the ability to back up on-premises workloads into Azure storage also. So you can back up client machines, you can back up your Hyper-V, your VMware infrastructure, you can use it for off-site or long-term retention. So typically, in the way that you'd use tape, you would ship your tape to a secondary or tertiary location, as the case may be. Instead of using tape, you can use Azure for your archiving location. And then also, we have protection from malware, which I'm going to demo for you guys in a moment. So if you have virtual machines that are running in Azure, this is a key scenario for using Azure to backup. Anybody have workloads running in Azure here? So your virtual machine's nice. So your virtual machines that you're running in Azure, it's a single click to enable protection for those virtual machines in Azure. We protect them from deletion, corruption, and I'll show you that in a moment. We also have what is called application consistent backup. So if you have databases that are running on Azure VMs, we take a small queries of the application, we write transactions into the database using the VSS service, and then we can take a backup. So what does that mean for you? If you have a failure on this virtual machine, it means that it minimizes your transaction loss with an application consistent backup. Your backup is taken without shutting down the virtual machine, and then also you can use it as, you can use those VM disks as data retention sources, for compliance. And all of this is done without deploying any infrastructure. It's a SaaS-based service. You can also provide your users with self-service restore if needed. And it's a complete backup as a service, and it's a pay-as-you-go model, right? You're not buying any hardware, you're not buying any storage. You're leveraging the storage capabilities in Azure, and you pay as you go based on the number of instances that you're protecting. Okay, so let's take a look at what VM backup looks like. So let's go back over to our Azure environment for a moment. So in this resource group in Azure, I have a number of virtual machines that are running. So I have here at least 2 VMs that are in my infrastructure. I have an application VM, and I have a database VM that I want to back up. So I've already created a recovery services vault. And a recovery services vault is simply the unit of management where I manage disaster recovery or backup. So when I want to back up an item, we can start by backing up the item right here in the Getting Started pane to execute the backup of that particular machine. So if we say we want to back up an Azure virtual machine, we select the machine that we want to, we set the backup operation that we want to execute. We choose the backup policy, or we can create a new backup policy. I'm just going to choose my daily policy here. And what you see on this policy is that it defines your retention requirements. When you back up, your weekly retention, your monthly retention, and your yearly retention. So if you think about this, the father, grandfather, son process of backing up, this would take you multiple tapes to do, and multiple tape drives as the case may be. So we simply select the backup policy, and then we can go ahead and choose the virtual machines that we want to back up. All right? We can take our backup also from a VM-centric view. So if I have VMs that are running and I go into my virtual machines, I can, on the properties of my virtual machine, I'll also see my backup gesture. So if I select backup, again, I can see, and in this case, I'm already backing up this virtual machine. So you'll see my backup policy. You will see how many restore points I have over a particular period and what backup policy I'm using and the last restore point that was created. And obviously, I can execute a restore of the virtual machine, from this pane. All right. Let's jump back and talk a little bit more about the capabilities. So with backing up Azure virtual machines, there are some key things that you can do. You can do a restore of the VM, a full restore as is, or at a particular restore point as you desire. You can restore disks on those virtual machines. This is done by PowerShell. You can, let's say you want to move that disk to a separate location, DR, well, not necessarily DR testing, but backup testing. You can do that by restoring with PowerShell. And then also, you can do item level restore from Azure VMs. You have a file got corrupted in your running VM. You can go into your backup and restore that file also. Now, another key concern is ransomware. there's a lot of, as you browse the internet, there's a lot of potential, for ransomware to take over your virtual machines. And there's a lot of information going about as to the best way to protect your environment from ransomware. And one of the things that the biggest recommendation is made is that cloud-based backup is a method or an opportunity for you to leverage a SaaS-based service to protect you, from ransomware scenarios. So with Azure Backup, we have 3 capabilities that help to protect organizations from ransomware. So we have a prevention level, we have an alerting level, and a recovery level. And what this means, at the prevention level, when you try to execute a disruptive operation on your backup, we give you the ability, or we ask for a PIN before that backup can be restored. From the alerting point of view, again, if somebody asks to or tries to do a destructive operation, for example, delete your backup, what we will do is send an email alert to the backup administrator so that we know that an operation is trying to take place on your backup infrastructure. And then also from a recovery point of view, if your backup is deleted for whatever reason, let's say somebody compromises the environment, we keep that deleted data for 14 days, right? That gives the ability, if somebody tries to steal that data, you still have the ability inside the Azure environment to recover that data. So let's take a quick look at what that looks like also. Sorry, I have to be switching screens. But let's take a quick look. All right. So on this VM that I protected, let's go back to our backup vault here. So on the VM that I protected, if we go to our backup vault, and we go to the properties of that backup vault, and there's an option called our security settings. It gives us the ability to, when we want to do a recovery, we can generate a PIN that allows us to enter that PIN for recovery purposes. Under the security settings option, what you'll see are some settings that will that apply security requirements for your backup infrastructure. All right, so if you want to ensure that the retention of deleted backup data for 14 days, ensure that more than one recovery point is in case of attack, so you have multiple recovery points, and then also alert and notification, and a security PIN for critical operations. So if I was to jump to a VM that I'm protecting with backup, let me log in here. Okay, I was protecting my V4, my VM that was part of my my blog engine that I just recovered. But when it comes up back, I'll show you that. But the idea is that if I try to do a disruptive operation, such as stopping the backup, it will ask me for a PIN to recover that virtual machine. And when my environment is back online, I'll show you that gesture. Let's go back here. All right, let's jump back in. All right. So we do support, as I said, these capabilities that protects us from ransomware. The other thing that and we'll come back to the ransomware demo in a moment. The other thing that we support is backup of VMware infrastructure. So if you have an ESXi host running in your environment, we support the ability to back up VMs that are running on your ESXi host. So it has to be VMware 5.5 or 6.0. It's an agentless backup. So it's connecting the backup server to your VMware environment, and then we can take backup, and it discovers your components that are, your virtual machines that are on that environment. So let's jump back to the demo to show you that, what that looks like. Okay, let's bring back up our environment here. And so this is Azure Backup Server that's running on a virtual machine that's inside my data center. And if you wanted to, first of all, connect your VMware environment into this backup server, you go to the management pane, and you would hit Add. Give me 1 minute here. We go to our management pane. Go to production servers and hit add. And we have the ability to add a VMware server into the infrastructure. Basically, it asks you for the IP address of your vCenter infrastructure and the administrative password for your, well, you don't have to use the administrative password. Because it's just reading the information from the VMware environment. And you can create an additional backup account that allows you to back up your data. So once you've connected your environment, you can go back to protection, and you can create protection groups to back up your VMware virtual machines. And that would be simply by hitting New. Creating a new protection group, selecting the servers, selecting my VMware server, and choosing the VM or VMs that I want to back up. Hit next. Now, one of the key things here is that with the VMware backup, there are 2 levels of protection. So here, you're backing up to disk first, and then you're tiering off to the cloud. So if you want to have near-term recovery over a particular number of days, we select backup to disk. So this is your operational level recovery. And if you need, for compliance or archiving purposes, then you have the ability to tier that data off after a number of days to clouds. You can determine, what's your retention period on-premise before that data is tiered off to cloud. All right? We choose where we want the pool that we want to back up from. Oh, I'm already backing up this machine. So we choose the pool that we want to back up from, and then we'll continue, with our backup operation. All right. I'll just jump back to our slides. All right. All right. So we do support, as I said, the ability to backup workloads that are running on premises or in the cloud. And this is what your typical architecture for backup looks like. So it's either leveraging Azure Backup Server, which is can be a VM connected with storage spaces that is running on premise. You can use it to back up virtual machines, SQL, or Exchange, or Active Directory for that case. You can back that up to the cloud or over the internet. And then you can also back up items that are running in the Azure Fabric, into storage, Azure storage as the case may be, right? And it gives you the ability to do not only VM level restore, but also application and item level restore. So here's a scenario that we have with a particular customer that has leveraged backup successfully, for their environment. So Manulife had some key capabilities that they were looking for from a backup solution. Now, their focus was to introduce cloud into their environment so that they could scale quickly for new applications and had an environment that was not costly to deploy. So what they did was they're looking to empower a new business model in their infrastructure. So what they did was leverage some key tenets that they wanted to ensure that whatever cloud vendor they decided to use was able to meet. And it's basically the ability to ensure that it was available in the regions that they operated their business. It was minimizing the support infrastructure. So can I have a service that didn't require me to deploy infrastructure and needed an extensive support model so that my business could scale? And then also the ability to have a distributed environment that would give them the ability to respond quickly in the case of any failures. So basically what they did was leverage Azure to protect their environment. They leveraged it, reason being because we had comprehensive protection across the cloud. So whether it be virtual machines, whether it be files, whether it be components running in Azure, we gave them that capability with Azure. We also gave them the need to decrease on the reliance on their existing infrastructure. So instead of deploying new resources, right, we, by an agent or by direct a SaaS connection, we give them the ability to back up in Azure. And then also we provide them the ability to provide long-term retention using Azure storage at the same time. So with that, they were able to scale the operations and were able to protect over 2,000 virtual machines at the moment, and then over 10,000 high-performance computing clusters that are protected running in Azure. And why did Manulife choose OMS and the Azure? OMS from the backup point of view, because Azure Backup and Disaster Recovery is a part of the OMS suite. And these are the key things that we have been talking about from earlier. Unlimited scale, lower operational cost, because it's an OpEx spend and not a capital expenditure, new hardware. A unified experience, as I showed a while ago. One pane of glass to manage your backup and your disaster recovery. And then also, because we are cross-regional support, 34 data centers across the world, multiple levels of redundancy in the infrastructure. And then also, one of the key capabilities that that was helpful to them or important to them was that there was anytime DR planning and testing. So with Azure Site Recovery, you are not bound to a minimum or maximum number of DR testing per year or per month or whatever. You can test DR whenever you feel like, whatever time, is important to you. And we'll talk about Azure Site Recovery in a moment. And then key and also the long-term retention policies. You have the ability to retain your data up to 99 years inside Azure. There's no additional cost to keeping your data over an extended period of time. So what are the results? Some key things that take place, as I said, multiple virtual machines protected, reduction in cost of protection, and then also minimal infrastructure and software deployment. Right? In some cases, it's agentless because they had infrastructure workloads running on Hyper-V or VMware environment that there's no need to deploy an agent to the virtual machines to protect them. So as their organization continues to grow, the future direction as they continue to leverage Azure for the disaster recovery and data management, data retention capabilities is to continue to leverage the infrastructure, first of all, from a migration point of view. As they add additional businesses, they'll be able to use ASR to migrate their workloads into the cloud. And then, key and important, as they have workloads running in Azure, we have the capability to do DR between Azure regions using Azure Site Recovery between different Azure data centers. And I'll demo that for you in a moment. So when we talk about and we think about cloud backup and what cloud backup provides for organizations, there are three key things that are important. It's a born in the cloud operation. There's no need to bring VM licensing. There's no need to run virtual machines to create your backup infrastructure if you're backing up cloud components only. It's a SaaS service, right, that runs in Azure, in the Azure backbone, without you need to stand up an infrastructure. And then we also support enterprise backup. So you might have other tools that you're using now for your backup solution. One of the things that you can do is that you can leverage Azure for long-term retention for these backup solutions because some of them support the ability, virtual appliances in Azure, if that's one method that you want to go. Or you can replace them, if needed, with Azure Backup that gives you the ability to back up directly to the cloud. And then also, you might have a scenario where you have remote branch offices. And typically what happens in those cases is that with remote branch office locations, usually you back up the data on tape if you don't have a WAN infrastructure, and then ship that data into your head office and back up that data at head office or ship that data off to a third-party location. So with remote office protection, we give you the ability, again, to self-serve backup for those locations. You can create a backup vault for them in Azure and enable them to back up their workloads independently. You can have the ability to manage them, but also give them the ability to do self-service restore. Hyperscale, a OpEx-based solution, and then also the ability to do regional backups, as the case may be. And we wrap all of this around a unified experience and a secure infrastructure. Your data is transferred securely in flight. And also data at rest, we support encryption for free in storage accounts inside Azure. And then obviously we maintain compliance and it helps you to reduce the cost and complexity of your backup solution. When we talk about Cloud First Archive, again, this addresses the issue with needing to maintain multiple tapes, and multiple retention policies for your tape infrastructure. So here again, you're leveraging Azure for an archiving solution. Right? Whether for compliance reason, long-term retention, we give you the ability using a device called StoreSimple, which also is a physical device, but it also can be deployed as a virtual appliance. It's basically an iSCSI target that you replicate or you copy data to. You can use it to store file shares. But the big value of it is that it gives you the ability to replicate data from that appliance into Azure. So you might have cold data. We replicate that data into Azure, so that's a tiering solution that tiers that data off into Azure. And then we have your hot data will retain on-premise, or you have a hot tier that you can quickly access, as the case may be. So this is a high-level view of our StoreSimple solution. You might have files and folders, on-premises. The cool tier is data that is not accessed on a frequent basis, and then you might have some files that you need to access regularly. Those will be stored in the hot tier. And Azure supports this cool storage capability. It's a blob storage component that you can store long-term or archival data at a reasonable rate. It's like 1 cent per gig, right? So that gives you flexibility in your storage infrastructure. The other thing that we talk about is cloud-first disaster recovery. Now, business continuity is very, very important. And cloud-first disaster recovery gives us the ability to leverage Azure for your disaster recovery components. By show of hands, let me see how many folks are running, for example, Hyper-V or VMware in their data center. Are you using something like SRM or some other solutions to replicate your number of folks? So one of the things with on-premises disaster recovery solutions is that there's a cost, there's a cost assigned to everything, but they can be cost prohibitive. Because if you think about what you need to do to replicate virtual machines, it tends to be that you need to stand up a secondary infrastructure, have the VMs replicated over there. It might be in a colo facility, or you might need to stand up your own data center. So with cloud-first disaster recovery, and again, it's the concerns and the complexity, the issues are the same. Cost, complexity, and protecting only a minimum number of workload because of these two. So with Azure, or Azure Site Recovery, we give you the ability to replicate virtual machines from on-premises or in Azure, from between Azure regions, leveraging a component that is called Azure Site Recovery. Now, these virtual machines can be VMware, they can be Hyper-V VMs, or they can be physical machines. We support multiple operating systems, or well Linux and Windows to be direct. And you can also replicate not only to Azure, but if you have an on-site or on-premise infrastructure, we can use ASR to replicate between those two locations. Now, at the current time, if you have workloads running in other clouds, for example, AWS, we support the ability to migrate those workloads into Azure. You can also migrate from on-premises, into the cloud. So why Azure Site Recovery? Azure Site Recovery has some key value points, for customers that, could be important for your infrastructure also. It's an automated VM level protection. We deploy a simple agent, which is called a mobility agent, that protects your workloads, in Azure. Not as a running virtual machine, but shut down and available for you to do DR testing, or in the case of a disaster happening, you have the ability to bring that workload back on premise. Or we do what is called near synchronous replication, because that mobility agent that sits on your virtual machine, it is tracking your writes that are happening real time and pushing them over to a management pane that replicates them up into Azure storage. You have the ability to, as I said, to do no impact drilling, where you can go into Azure, failover as many times as you want, when you want, to test to see if your application will run in the cloud. And then you have the ability to do a planned or unplanned failover depending on the disaster that happens. We also support the ability to fail back into your infrastructure. So let's say you're running in Azure and you rebuilt your on-premise infrastructure, then we can replicate that data, back on premises. So there are some key things why Azure Site Recovery is helpful to customers. It's simple and cost-effective. There's no infrastructure that you deploy. It's heterogeneous. It runs across, whether it's VMware, Hyper-V, physical machines. And then it also does not only VM level protection, but app consistent protection, as we said earlier, leveraging, for example, the VSS service that runs on a Windows machine. For Linux, it's crash consistency. It's also very application aware. So what we think about this is there are a number of applications that you might have: Exchange, SharePoint, SQL, whatever the application is. ASR is the tier 1 disaster recovery application for these solutions. And we publish documents that helps you to replicate your SharePoint farm into Azure and give you guidance as how you can create what we call recovery plans, that one-click button that recovers those applications for you. So here's an example of a hero scenario or my application level recovery for using ASR. So on premises, I might have an application, a multi-tier application like the one that I was showing a while ago, that has a database, app tier, and web tier. So here I have the ability, and this is a single instance application, a single web app, single database, single domain controller. I can use ASR to replicate these machines into Azure, shut down. But then also, if we have an application that is a multi-tier application, it might be a SQL farm and a web farm, our recommendation is, let's say you have multiple domain controllers, is to leverage domain controllers, is to leverage the native capabilities of AD replication or SQL database replication to replicate those tiers into Azure, and then we can use ASR to replicate the other components, right? As an example. And we have detailed guidance on this published to help you, if you need to test this out in your environment. Again, unified or unmatched application support. We support our core applications already, as well as other third-party applications using ASR. Right? So let's look back at our demo. Because we failed over a machine a moment ago, let's jump back into my demo environment, and I'll talk about this quickly. Again, sorry for having to switch between screens. So let's go back to, first of all, into Azure to see if our application has successfully failed over. So let me go back into my recovery services vault, where I had executed my DR process by starting a recovery plan. And if I go to the recovery plan, it tells me that my application has failed over and waiting for user input. So if I drill down on what took place in my recovery plan, I can see what the recovery plan actually did. In this case, it started a couple of machines that were part of my application, executing a process, starting them in Azure, and bringing them online, and having them available for me. And this took the total of 16 minutes to bring this application online. So if I look at my virtual machines that are running in Azure, because I did a test there, I'll see a number of VMs that are called or end with the subscript test, because this is a test failure of my application. And again, just to show that this is not sleight of hand, my machines are shut down on premise. If I go back to my VMs, let me bring this here. And let's see if we can ping. So you notice now my virtual machine is back up with a different IP address. That IP address is from my network inside Azure. And if I was to go back to my blog and refresh that blog, right, eventually I would see the blog back online. Right? And just to show you that it's not sleight of hand or anything, I'm going to the machine that I'm pinging, it's a running VM in Azure. And if I go to the network components or the network interface of that VM, I'll see the IP address for the virtual machine that I just brought back online. So that is how we can leverage Azure for disaster recovery of our workloads that are running in the cloud, so that if they fail, right, we can bring those workloads running in my data center, I can bring them back in the cloud and have that application available to me. But disaster recovery on-premise is not only the capability that we support. Let's say we have a workload that is running inside Azure. So here I have a virtual machine that is part of a web farm. And I'm already protecting this virtual machine in Azure. But there's another component to the web farm that I want to protect. So if I go to my recovery services vault that is running in Azure, I can also, if you look at the items that I have replicating, this is a virtual machine that is part of a web farm that is running in my Azure cloud. I can also execute a process to fail over this virtual machine to another Azure region, right? Because at the current moment, I'm protecting, this machine is running in South India region, and I'm going to fail it over into Central India in the case of a disaster in one of my Azure regions. And to replicate or protect that machine is pretty simple. I just hit replicate. I choose my source as Azure. Okay. This is a brand new feature. It was actually released today. But basically what you do is change this to Azure. You choose the VM that you want to replicate, and you'll be able to replicate that over into a secondary region. Let me see if refreshing this page will allow me to get to it. Okay, great. So, oh, this is backup. Let me go back into my recovery services vault here, hit replicate. Okay, all right. But the idea, what happens is that you have the ability to choose VMs that are running in Azure, replicate them over to a second region, and, and protect those running workloads for recovery, as the case may be. If I'll work on this and I'll get it back up when we're at the Ask the Expert table. If anybody's interested, we could take a look on it. So just to kind of close the loop on the discussion about DR in Azure, there are some key things why you'd want to do protection in Azure. Again, they're similar like your on-premise infrastructure. Compliance, the ability to fail over your application based on your own business needs, right? So you might be in some third-party cloud, or you might be in a managed service environment, and there are some shutout periods or some periods in which you can't do DR. With Azure Site Recovery, or with DRing workloads in Azure, we don't give you, or we don't stop you from DRing whenever you want, right? And then also you want the ability to perform DR drill with no production impact. So while your VMs are protected in Azure, you can fail over those virtual machines into an isolated network without impacting your production, your protected VMs that are running in production. So it's a no impact DR testing. And then we give you the ability also to restore that workloads to a different geo based on the one that you're running in. As I saw a while ago, I might be running in East US. I can recover my virtual machines in West US or Central US, as the case may be, or even a data center that is not inside the continental US. And it's the same capabilities as if you're running on-premise. We give you the ability to do, there's no DR infrastructure, it's a SaaS-based service, and we minimize RPO and RTO intervals, because it's a near synchronous replication capability, and we do support the ability to fail back into your infrastructure. Right. So with a cloud-first disaster recovery solution, there are some key things that you will achieve. Obviously is similar to backup. It's a cloud-based solution. It's born in the cloud. It gives the ability to do disaster recovery drills, no impact disaster recovery drills, as we're saying. And again, it's an enterprise solution, right? There's no infrastructure that you need to deploy, but it's in most cases, it's a simple agent that's deployed on the machine that you can protect your workloads. And again, this is all wrapped around a single pane of glass and a management pane that allows you to protect your data. Now, as I was saying earlier, there is an ecosystem of partners that support both our backup and our disaster recovery solution. So, for example, if you're working with any one of these partners that support virtual storage or virtual appliances inside the Azure pane or the Azure infrastructure, you can leverage ASR in collaboration with these third-party vendors to have a holistic DR solution. So let's say, for example, you're running a NetApp storage appliance. We have integration with NetApp that allows you to protect your VMs that might be running on that appliance with ASR and replicating them into Azure storage. Now, if you go to azure.com, you can get additional details regarding our backup and archive solution. There are a lot of details on the website if you want to get details on how the solution works, or you want to get started on these solutions. And then there are some key things, why Microsoft, and Azure in particular, is a key win for you as far as your DR solution. It's hyperscale in the ability that it gives you the ability to, as your business grow, you're scaling up without need or concern or whether or not the infrastructure will be there to protect you. You have the ability to try before you buy the solution. There's a 31-day window that you can use ASR without paying for it, before you commit to using it. And then it gives you protection across your business, whether it's disaster recovery or whether it is data loss prevention using ASR or Azure Backup or cloud-based archiving. Now, from an IT resource point of view, there are a number of free resources that you guys want to take advantage of, right? And if you go out onto the Azure website or the IT Pro Center, you'll see solutions that you can leverage, to understand and test out your infrastructure before you put it into production. Key value is this: you get $300 Azure credit to test out those Azure solutions in your environment before you deploy it in production. And then there are a number of blogs that you can also look at to understand more about how Azure works, and training and certification videos that can help you get up to speed with Azure itself. Just remember, very, very important, in a few minutes, we have an Ask the Expert section in Hall D1, that if you have specific questions and you want to get additional details, we can take those questions offline. And again, thank you for attending the session. And if you have any questions, I'll take them for the next few minutes, and then we can head to the Ask the Expert session. Thank you.